What if one king accumulated so much gold and silver in his treasury that it exceeded the entire gold supply of the European continent, not through mining or production, but through systematic extraction from 50 million people across 3 continents paying tribute every year for 2 centuries? 522 BC, Darius I becomes king of kings of the Persian Empire after a bloody coup. He inherits an empire spanning from Egypt to India, but it's administratively chaotic, no systematic taxation, tribute collected irregularly, provinces operating semi-independently. Within 3 years, Darius reorganizes the entire empire into 20 satrapies, administrative provinces, and establishes fixed annual tribute that each satrapy must pay to the imperial treasury in Persepolis. Egypt pays 700 talents of silver annually. Babylon pays 1,000 talents. The Indian satrapies pay gold dust equivalent to 4,680 talents in value. Across 20 satrapies, total annual tribute is 14,560 talents of gold and silver, roughly 437 tons of precious metal flowing into Persian treasury every single year. This continues for 200 years. By the time Alexander III of Macedon conquers Persia in 330 BC, the accumulated treasury at Persepolis, Susa, Babylon, and Ecbatana contains 180,000 talents, approximately 5,400 tons of gold and silver. To put this in perspective, the total gold reserves of all European kingdoms combined in 300 BC was estimated at roughly 30,000 to 40,000 talents maximum. The Persian king controlled 4 to 6 times more gold than existed in all of Europe. This is the story of how systematic imperial extraction over 2 centuries accumulated wealth that exceeded anything Europe possessed, why the satrapy tribute system was the most efficient wealth concentration mechanism in the ancient world, how this massive treasure enabled Persian imperial power for 200 years, then destroyed the empire when Alexander captured it and flooded the economy, and why understanding Persian gold reveals the pattern all empires follow. Extraction concentrates wealth until the concentration becomes so extreme it triggers collapse. The lesson is clear. Empires don't produce wealth, they extract it, and the most successful empires extract systematically over centuries until one conqueror captures the accumulated treasure and destroys the economic system that created it. Let's start with how Darius I actually built the tribute system and why the numbers were so staggering. Before Darius reorganized the empire around 520 BC, Persian kings collected tribute irregularly, provinces sent gifts, paid some taxes, but there was no systematic accounting. Darius changed everything by dividing the empire into 20 satrapies based on geographic and ethnic regions, appointing a satrap, governor to each, and establishing fixed annual tribute amounts that never changed. This was revolutionary because it made imperial income predictable and separated tribute from actual economic conditions in the provinces. Egypt had good harvest or bad harvest, didn't matter. They owed 700 talents annually regardless. The tribute was set high enough to extract significant wealth, but low enough that provinces could reliably pay it without revolting. Here are the actual tribute amounts for major satrapies. Babylon and Assyria paid 1,000 talents of silver annually, the largest single satrapy payment reflecting Babylon's enormous agricultural wealth and commercial importance. Egypt paid 700 talents, extracted from the Nile Valley's agricultural surplus that had enriched pharaohs for 3,000 years and now enriched Persian kings. The satrapies of Asia Minor combined paid approximately 3,600 talents. Lydia alone paid 500 talents from its legendary gold, deposits that King Croesus had controlled before Persian conquest. The eastern satrapies, including Bactria and Sogdiana, paid 600 talents extracted from Central Asian trade routes. And the Indian satrapies paid gold dust valued at 4,680 talents, by far the richest tribute because India had significant gold deposits and production, and the tribute was paid in actual gold dust panned from rivers rather than silver coins. When you add up all 20 satrapies, the total was 14,560 talents per year. At average weight of approximately 30 kilograms per talent, that's 437,000 kilograms, 437 tons, of gold and silver flowing into Persian treasury annually. Here's why this amount was so extraordinary compared to European gold holdings. Europe in the 4th century BC had minimal gold production and small accumulated reserves. Greece had some silver mines at Laurion near Athens, producing maybe 30 to 50 talents annually at peak. The rest of Europe, Gaul, Iberia, Italy, the Balkans, had scattered gold deposits but no systematic mining or large-scale production. The total gold and silver reserves held by all Greek city-states, Italian tribes, and European kingdoms combined was estimated by historians at 30,000 to 40,000 talents maximum in 300 BC. This wasn't annual production. This was total accumulated reserves held by every treasury, temple, and king from the Atlantic to the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Persia was collecting 14,560 talents per year from tributaries. In just 3 years, Persian tribute collection equaled everything Europe owned. Over 200 years from Darius I in 522 BC to Darius III defeated by Alexander in 330 BC, the accumulated total was approximately 2.9 million talents if you assume consistent collection. But accounting for wars, revolts, and periods of disruption, realistic accumulated total by 330 BC was probably 180,000 talents in the major treasuries at Persepolis, Susa, Ecbatana, and Babylon. That's 5,400 tons of precious metal, 4 to 6 times the entire gold and silver reserves of Europe. One empire, one treasury system, more wealth than an entire continent. The extraction mechanism reveals why this system worked for 2 centuries without collapsing the provinces being taxed. The tribute amounts were fixed, which meant they represented different percentages of provincial wealth depending on the province. Rich satrapies like Egypt and Babylon paid 700 to 1,000 talents on economies worth tens of thousands of talents, so tribute was maybe 5 to 10% of total wealth. Poorer satrapies paid smaller absolute amounts but similar percentages. This was sustainable extraction, painful but not destroying the economic base. The satrap collected the tribute through local taxation, kept a percentage for provincial administration and personal wealth, typically 20 to 30%, and sent the rest to Persepolis. This created incentive alignment. Satrap wanted the province prosperous enough to pay tribute because he extracted his percentage from the tribute collection. If he overtaxed and destroyed the provincial economy, tribute would fall and his income would drop. So satrapies were managed to maintain productive capacity while extracting maximum sustainable tribute. This is empire economics perfected. Don't kill the host, just extract continuously at the maximum rate the host can survive. The system worked for 2 centuries because it was extracting wealth without destroying the ability to produce wealth. Compare this to later empires that extracted so aggressively they destroyed provincial economies, Rome in North Africa, Spain in the Americas, and you see why Persian system lasted longer. They found the optimal extraction rate and maintained it for 200 years. The concentration of this wealth in Persepolis and other treasury cities reveals what empires do with extracted wealth. They hoard it. The Persian king didn't invest the gold in productive enterprises, build massive infrastructure across the empire, or redistribute it to improve provincial welfare. He stored it. The treasury at Persepolis was literally a massive stockpile of gold and silver bars, coins, and ingots sitting in vaults guarded by the 10,000 immortals, the elite imperial guard. Some wealth was used for royal expenditure, palace construction, military campaigns, and gifts to loyal nobles, but the vast majority was accumulated and saved. Why? Because massive treasury was the physical manifestation of imperial power. The King of Kings sat on top of a mountain of gold that proved his supremacy over all other rulers. When foreign ambassadors visited Persepolis, they were shown the treasury. Rooms filled floor to ceiling with gold bars, as demonstration of Persian power. The wealth wasn't meant to circulate or be used productively. It was meant to impress, intimidate, and serve as emergency reserve for military campaigns. This is wealth concentration in its purest form, extraction from 50 million people across 3 continents, accumulated in one location, controlled by one man, used to maintain power structure that enabled continued extraction. The gold didn't benefit the empire broadly. It benefited the imperial system that perpetuated itself through the wealth it extracted. Then Alexander arrived, and everything that made Persia powerful destroyed it. 334 BC, Alexander crosses into Asia Minor with 40,000 soldiers. Over 4 years, he defeats 3 Persian armies, Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela, and by 330 BC he's captured the imperial capitals. At Persepolis, he finds 40,000 talents stored in underground vaults. At Susa, 50,000 talents. At Babylon, 30,000 talents. At Ecbatana, another 60,000 talents. Total captured, 180,000 talents, 5,400 tons of gold and silver accumulated over 2 centuries. This was the largest treasure capture in ancient history, perhaps in all history when adjusted for the value at the time. And Alexander spent it. Over the next 10 years until his death in 323 BC, he distributed the treasure to his soldiers as bonuses, used it to pay for continuous military campaigns into India and Central Asia, built new cities across his conquered territories, minted hundreds of thousands of coins, and basically flooded the ancient Mediterranean and Near East economy with gold and silver that had been locked in Persian treasuries for 200 years. The economic result was catastrophic hyperinflation. Prices across the region rose 300 to 500% between 330 BC and 300 BC, according to ancient sources and surviving price records. Grain that cost 2 drachmas per measure before Alexander's conquest cost 8 drachmas after. Olive oil quadrupled in price. Labor costs exploded as workers demanded wages in the now abundant currency. The treasure that made Persia powerful, that physical manifestation of imperial supremacy sitting in Persepolis vaults, became the weapon that destroyed the Persian economic system. Suddenly, gold was common instead of rare. The Persian daric, gold coin that had been the reserve currency for 200 years, accepted from India to Greece, prized for its consistent 8.4-gram weight and purity, became worthless because Alexander minted so many coins from the captured gold that the currency flooded the market and lost all value premium. The empire that concentrated more wealth than all of Europe collapsed economically not from losing battles, but from having its accumulated treasure looted and spent, which destroyed the monetary system that underpinned imperial power. The concentration that enabled Persian dominance became the mechanism of Persian destruction. This is the empire pattern that repeats across history. Extraction concentrates wealth, concentrated wealth enables empire. But the concentration becomes vulnerability because one military defeat can transfer centuries of accumulated wealth to conquerors who destroy the system by spending it. Rome accumulated massive treasury through conquest and taxation. Then various crises and civil wars saw the treasury looted repeatedly, each time destroying Roman monetary stability and contributing to eventual collapse. Spain extracted massive silver from the Americas, over 150,000 tons in 3 centuries, accumulated it in Madrid and Seville. Then wars drained the treasury and flooded Europe with silver, causing inflation that destroyed Spanish purchasing power and economic dominance. The British Empire accumulated gold reserves through colonial extraction. Then 2 world wars drained the reserves and ended sterling's role as reserve currency, collapsing British imperial power. Every empire follows the same pattern. Systematic extraction over long period, wealth concentration in imperial center. Then sudden military defeat or crisis transfers the wealth and destroys the economic foundation of the empire. The Persian treasury was the perfect example because the numbers were so extreme. 5,400 tons of gold and silver, more than all of Europe, accumulated through 200 years of systematic tribute extraction from 20 satrapies spanning 3 continents, then captured in 4 years by Alexander and spent in 10 years, destroying both the Persian imperial system and creating hyperinflation across the known world. The concentration that enabled Persian power became the mechanism of Persian destruction. This is the empire economy, where we decode patterns operating in plain sight but rarely explained honestly. Darius I built the most efficient extraction system in the ancient world. 20 satrapies paying fixed tribute totaling 14,560 talents annually. 437 tons of gold and silver flowing into Persian treasury every year for 200 years, accumulating into 180,000 talents that exceeded the entire gold reserves of Europe by 4 to 6 times. This wealth didn't benefit the 50 million people it was extracted from. It sat in vaults in Persepolis as physical manifestation of imperial power, hoarded rather than invested, concentrated rather than circulated, serving only to demonstrate the supremacy of the King of Kings. Then Alexander conquered Persia in 4 years, captured the entire accumulated treasure, spent it in 10 years, and destroyed the economic system through hyperinflation caused by flooding the market with gold that had been locked away for 2 centuries. The empire that perfected extraction collapsed because concentrated wealth became concentrated vulnerability, and the tribute system that built the largest treasure in the ancient world couldn't survive the day that treasure was captured and released into circulation. Every empire concentrates wealth through extraction until the concentration becomes the point of failure, and Persia was the purest example in ancient history of this pattern, executing perfectly from extraction to accumulation to catastrophic distribution. One king collected more gold than existed in all of Europe, and that concentration destroyed his empire.